Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you today.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing very well. New week, a new day, a new problem, no old problems. We deal with a lot of old problems, but they seem to hang around, and the politicians were busy over the weekend, and one of the secretaries got fired, Kirstjen Nielsen, who ran one of the smaller departments, 200,000 people in it, and it wasn't going well. She has the Department of Homeland Security. And I remember it well when they decided to make the biggest bureaucratic department ever, right after 9/11, and they put everything together. And for some reason, I didn't like that idea. I thought that was a bureaucracy that would be inept and not able to do the job. And maybe that's exactly what's happening here. I mean, it's huge, 200,000 employee dealing with the most difficult problem, which is immigration, which is very emotional, very philosophical, and very political, demagogues out there trying to make points. And it also makes an opportunity for those in the big pictures of trying to disrupt the world with cultural Marxism. Boy, believe me, try to drive some wedges between people. Yeah. In this statement with her resignation, you heard people like Pelosi and others, oh yes, it's the children, they're the ones who put children in cages, even though the policy was about like what the Democrats have been doing. So there's a lot of room for demagoguing, but it's still a pretty major issue, mainly because our president considers it an important issue. I consider it an important issue, but the political base consider it a very, very important position, and the president has staked out a position which a lot hangs on this, and that's what's going on, and it hasn't gone well. Of course, we could argue different reasons why it hasn't gone well, but somebody's going to have to get blamed. This weekend, Nielsen got blamed, and she got her walking papers, and so what will come next is another question, but for some reason, I'm not overly optimistic that the next approach from the people that we have in Washington, the Republicans and Democrats seem to have problems with this. I don't think they're going to come up with an answer. So I'm going to have you help me describe the problem, then I'm going to help to try to describe what I think could, solve some of the problem.
And I remember really clearly when they created the Department of Homeland Security. It was a great response to 9/11, and you argued that this is going to be a disaster. In fact, I'm going to go back and find some of your statements back then, because they said, oh no, Ron, this is going to consolidate. This will streamline government. This will shrink it, and you said, no, this is going to make it far worse. But, Nielsen's been on the ropes for a while. Back in October, Politico reported that there was a shouting match between John Kelly, who was then the chief of staff, and John Bolton, screaming about Nielsen, screaming about that was the last time there was a real uptick in border crossings. That's, it's deja vu. The president at the time said, I'm going to shut this border down. I'm going to shut the border down. Bolton is yelling at Kelly that Nielsen is not tough enough. And Kelly and Nielsen were fairly close. And so that would mean that she's on Bolton's bad list. So she's probably been in the radar for a while. There was speculation then that she might leave. So it's Bolton seeing Nielsen as kind of a holdover. And don't forget the important thing for all of the potential faults of Kelly, he was the guy who kept Bolton away from Trump back then. He put out a notice, Bolton can't just walk in and talk to Trump.
Well, the fact that the rumors out there, or the innuendo, is that Bolton wanted her gone makes us very suspicious of what's going on. But the big problem is finding out whether she was kicked out because she was too lenient and tolerant, or she was overly abusive and rounding up kids and putting them in cages and doing all these evil things that the Democrats introduced and supported. Otherwise, it's a political thing. So that is not going to be easy, because I concentrate more on policy rather than the way they operate things. Maybe it's a unmanageable situation on this, because we've had immigration going on for hundreds of years, and we've absorbed a lot of people, but right now there's quite a few things that complicate the borders. And my argument over the years has always been that incentives drive so much of policy. If you have an incentive not to work, you might not work if you're going to get exactly the same amount. So there's the incentive of coming here for various reasons. Problems in Central America but do they talk about how we contributed to the problems in Central America? And places like Venezuela, these different places, we contribute to the problem. But the incentive is there. I mean, you can't say that a human being is evil because they live in Central America. That's a mess. There's not too many libertarian countries down there, even though they've had, in Central and South America, have had countries that were more freedom-loving and they were prosperous and there was less of this. But right now, there's a tremendous incentive to come. It's a freer country, it's a richer country, and it's also used as a tool, to stir up trouble. And one thing that you and I have talked about, and we haven't found the final answer, is who pays their way? Who buys these bus tickets?
Yeah.
Who buys? Remember the train? How did this train just happen to appear? And then we have to badger the president of Mexico. Well, wouldn't that be enough to say, hey, look, what are you guys doing to us? You're picking up people by train in Central America and hauling them up and dumping them on our border?
Yeah.
I mean, that should have raised a few questions. But we never hear about the finances. But I just don't believe all those peoples and all of that marching done spontaneously on their own time. Where did they get food and how did they where did they sleep and all these things? How did they get their cell phones recharged? So there's those technical things, but overall it is a mess. It's a political mess right now, and it's also an issue of humanitarianism, how people are treated and what's going to happen. But what I work on is trying to remove the incentives for coming here.
And you mentioned the political implications, and there are serious political implications because the president, despite what he may say at his rallies, has had a difficult time delivering on a lot of his promises. And this is a big one, and this is a pretty strong issue for people that support the president, the idea of closing the border. There's a lot of scapegoating going on, and there's some of it is actually true. I think Bolton understands that this is a real serious political issue for the president going into 2020. You look at people like Ann Coulter, who's broken with the president. Hey, you promised us the wall. What's going on? It's a real problem, and it's a weak spot. Ironically, I was thinking as I wrote that, a lot of the lack of successes that the president has had are due to Bolton himself. Remember, he's the one that blew up the North Korea talks by telling Trump, hey, tell them to give us their nukes. He's the one that's messing up this Venezuela thing. So ironically, he's delivering these kinds of disasters to the president while all the time understanding that this is a potentially a big one for him.
On one of those days that we talked about Bolton in a negative way, I had a reminder sent to me. It says, Ron, that's right, but you have to remember who appointed him.
Yeah, I know.
So you can't just get off the hook. And I remember when anything went wrong in the Reagan administration. Reagan was a nice guy, and everybody loved Reagan, and they would just say, why don't you just let Reagan be Reagan, and he shouldn't have to be blamed for this. But Reagan, I think they should be assuming responsibility. This whole idea that there's so many neocons in here, and this mess here, though, is not, I don't think this falls into the category of the deep state neocons over here that has fed this information and converted Trump to this position. It seems like this is one that he's thought up all by himself on how intense it should be. It might be just a pragmatic political decision, for it. I wonder, I've never looked back, but I wonder what he said. He said a lot over the years on all issues. I wonder what his position was 20 years ago.
Yeah,
I wonder if it was the same. But at least he might see this in a pragmatic fashion. It came up. He knew that the Republican base, supported it, and he just latched onto it, and he won the election. So this might be just a pragmatic position for him.
And for better, for worse, Trump is a great orator. I mean, he's a great speaker. He knows how to catalyze people's emotions. He knows how to get emotional reactions out of crowds. Some people find that alarming. It may well be, but this is one of those issues. The word you used earlier, I think, was emotional, and it's incredibly emotional. I remember because I did immigration for you for a lot of years, and I still have kind of a PTSD from that. People yelling and screaming, and they didn't want to hear a reason. So he knows how to use that, but it's going to be a difficult thing for him. First of all, well, the House Democrats, of course, were criticizing him, criticizing Nielsen for being a monster. But, I looked it up, and I just wanted to double-check the statistics. But President Obama, the saint of the Democrats, deported more people than any other president in history. And, in fact, he deported more people than all other presidents combined before that, 2.5 million people. But the problem keeps getting worse, as we're facing now. So this goes to the second part of our title. What's the real problem?
Well, the one problem there is that I need to understand better is, exactly what transpires at the border. We see thousands marching on, and we're going to close the border, but all of a sudden you don't see them anymore, and then they say they're all here. And you have entry points, and you have a river. Some people come across the river, but I don't think these tens of thousands are walking across the river. It looks like they get to the entry points and they get asylum and they come in. But I don't know that for sure. But there's a mess at the border. Just the other day when Trump announced we're closing the border totally and completely, I mean, it was overkill, so he had to change his mind. And what it meant that those probably hundreds, if thousands of trucks going back and forth every day, because that's the commercial benefit of having a friendly neighbor you trade, and they're trading partners. So they say, well, we're going to close it out. So all of a sudden, did that all of a sudden have the trucks turn around and say, hey, this is not going to be nice? No, it multiplied, and then they got that mess, and the border became a disaster, so Trump had to back out. But I'm still wondering how the people who walk up there get entry, because you have the commercial people, but then you have the people that go back and forth every day. Some people come over here, believe it or not, for medical care and education. But they go back and forth every day, and they're known, and they have their paperwork. But then there should be another line. And why can't they just stop the line there and start asking questions? And the delay should be with the people that have not been allowed to enter yet. They should all be in Mexico, and maybe Mexico would do more. But that has to be solved. But my emphasis has always been on the philosophy of why do they come, and libertarians believe in trying to get, some believe in absolutely open borders, which I don't believe in, but I really believe in a generous approach to allowing people to come, having people come to work and visit. But where I think the incentives are wrong is to give immediate citizenship, or birthright citizenship, and let people come in, and then there will be this tremendous incentive. But the Democrats, and I imagine it's already happened, that people march over and they might have been assimilated for a week or two and they're voting, and then they'll say, oh no, that's not the case. But we know the case. And then somebody comes up with this brilliant solution. Well, we're told under the Constitution to count our people every 10 years. But you're not allowed to ask them if they're a citizen. Oh, okay, to have this state have a certain number of people, well, let's have a trainload of people go in, and all of a sudden they boost up. It makes no sense that you're not even allowed to ask if somebody blows up a bank or robs somebody or kills somebody. You're not allowed to ask him, are you an American citizen? It seems to me like you should be allowed to do it. But I think there's an incentive to come. We have a welfare state, and you could not discriminate against somebody who just came over and they're on asylum, and they bring their children, and sometimes not the parents drop them off. Sometimes the children go with other people, but the children, I think, so often are used as a tool. But if they're coming in, that shouldn't be an issue that they demagogue, and that's what I think they do. I think that problem is not quite as bad as what some are making it sound, because they say, oh yeah, they stop them at the border and they're putting kids in cages and all that stuff. But you can't deal with this border issue without looking at the drug war. You know, I saw an article this week, which I found interesting, and it said it was one of the first times that they really dissected it out, and it had to do with comparing alcohol deaths to opium deaths. And I always thought, my guess is that there's a lot more alcohol deaths, but nobody's talked about it. And this article did, and they did a study, and their study shows that there's a significant more deaths from alcohol than opioids. But just think of the hysteria over opioids and why they have to do have to close the border because of that. Well, why don't they do what they did with marijuana? The marijuana police aren't very prosperous these days, but we have to have them chasing after opioid, because I think if you give the voting and the welfare and the free medical care and all, I think it doesn't work. I think people should come if they're here or they want to come in and they want to be visitors and they want to stay a while and they want to work here. They have to be totally self-reliant. They cannot live off somebody else, and they don't have a right to somebody else's wealth. They can't come in and move in and say, well, I'm an illegal immigrant and I'm next door to your neighbor, so you have to take care of me. When my grandfather came over in the 19th century, he had to have a sponsor. Yeah. And he came, actually, interestingly enough, by himself at the age of 14. Wow. So he had to have a sponsor. And it happened to be that his dad had already been here. But you should have a sponsor. And so it's this system. But you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to say, oh, well, you can't have dual citizenship just because they came here illegal. You mean they can't get food stamps and free this and can't vote and all this stuff? So as long as that happens, I think this argument's going to go on for a long, long time, and it's liable to get violent.
At the very least, why not try this different approach? You know, they're doing the same thing they've done over, just like with foreign policy. Same thing they're doing over and over again. They think they're going to get different results. Why not try a different process? Right. You know, I think it's obvious that these people are in terrible situations. They're coming over because they're in poverty and they're having problems. Nobody wants to hear this because it's irritating. But you have to look at, well, why is this? You know, why are they doing this? A lot of it stems from the drug war, which you touched on very well, but also U.S. interventionism. You know, it was back in 2009, Hillary was going to save Honduras. She got Zelaya out, and he was a guy who was kind of independent-minded, and she got him out, and they had a coup. And since then, we did a show on this a while ago, and I have the statistics. I don't have them in front of me now, but the violence has skyrocketed. Drug gangs have skyrocketed. The instability, just like everywhere we have a coup, the instability is through the roof. Who wouldn't want to leave in a situation like that? So we do have to, if we want a holistic approach rather than just, you know, taking people from the border and throwing them back, we have to look at the antecedents. We have to look at what causes this. We have to look at a kind of a holistic way to solve the problem, do something different.
You know, if social chaos is a goal of some people in this world, and it is said that there are people like that would like to just see our social conditions just deteriorate, and that we get into these civil strifes and civil war or whatever, and there's a lot of threat. You know, the rich get rich and the poor get poorer, are a consequence of government. But if it is a goal of people who have a lot of money and they think more chaos is better, and they endorse the principles that you read about on cultural Marxism, this couldn't be a better idea on bringing about, you know, real dissent, because we might even get some libertarians who are disagreeing with our conversation. They might say, no, nobody comes in or everybody comes in. You know. So, but you know, the principle that I danced around there in my description is based on civil liberties and property rights. You can't come in and get on somebody else's property, and you don't have a civil right to live off somebody else. So the principle of property and civil liberty solves this, and maybe a token of constitutionalism could help us too.
Maybe Trump will give you a call instead of talking to Bolton.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we talked a little bit about the drug war today because it's integral to issues like this that are in the headlines. I just would say that we've got a lot going on at the Ron Paul Institute, including our conference next month in Houston on May 18th. And it is on the drug war, and we will touch on some of these issues. We've got some great speakers. Go to ronpaulinstitute.org/conference to get more info and tickets. They're going fast, Dr. Paul, but we're going to have a good time in Houston. We're going to talk about things that are really ripped from the headlines.
Very good. And my conclusion is that firing Nielsen is not going to solve anything, because I think it's a bigger problem. I guess it has to do with all the politicizing of this and demagoguing and what is the policy, and working with a policy that's been around for a long time, as Daniel so well pointed out. That why do we keep doing it if it isn't working very well? And the worse things get, the more they do the same thing over and over again. Then there's an argument over somebody like Nielsen. Is she too soft and not tough enough, or is she overly tough? And that to me should be a pretty good indication there's something wrong with the policy. And it's the answer certainly isn't open borders, let everybody come in and live under the conditions that are legally demanded that we give to anybody that arrives here. Free stuff, and that can't work, because it's there's going to be coming a time, and I think we're getting closer to it, that we're going to run out of money, whether it's the money to police the world and interfere in governments in Central America, or to run the welfare state here. So when that happens, this will change, and unless we come up with better policy, this problem of conflict is going to get much worse. Of course, the goal is to work for peace and prosperity without conflict, but you have to emphasize and understand the importance of what it means to have property, to have contracts, and respect other people, and to also realize that you can't expect somebody else to take care of oneself. The people should be responsible for themselves, and that to me is the biggest problem. And I think our policies today doesn't do anything for this, because immediately this immigration is a challenge to everybody. So yes, my proposal and my thoughts, I would admit, are far from perfect, but I tell you what, they're different, and it would endorse the principle of the libertarian principle of voluntarism, property rights, and getting along with people. And I believe that is a much better approach than what we have today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.